pastor's perfect daughter hides a secret life that slowly pulls her into mistakes, heartbreak, and a truth that can no longer stay buried. Everyone thought Mirabel was perfect. From the moment she walked into the church, heads turned. Not because she demanded attention, but because she never did. Her voice was soft, her steps were gentle, and her smile felt calm enough to quiet a noisy room. She was the pastor's daughter, yes, but more than that, she was the example everyone trusted. Parents whispered her name to their daughters. Be like Mirabel. Dress like Mirabel. Pray like Mirabel. She led worship with her eyes closed and her hands lifted, as if nothing in the world could shake her faith. When she sang, people felt peace. When she spoke, adults nodded with approval. She never argued, never complained, never stepped out of line. To the church, Mirabel was purity wrapped in kindness. Her father often spoke of her with pride from the pulpit. He called her a blessing, a light, proof that raising a child in God's way always worked. And Mirabel stood beside him, calm and composed, wearing the image everyone loved. At school, teachers admired her discipline. She submitted assignments on time. She followed rules without resistance. She dressed modestly, spoke politely, and kept to herself. No scandals, no drama, no rumors. Just a quiet girl who seemed to have everything under control. But what people saw was only the surface. They didn't see the weight behind her smile. They didn't hear the silence she carried home with her every day. They didn't notice how often she locked her bedroom door. Mirabel had learned early that being good meant being invisible. It meant not asking questions, not expressing anger, not admitting confusion. In her world, perfection was rewarded, but honesty was dangerous. Inside, she worked hard to keep the image intact. She folded her hands when adults spoke. She kept her Bible close. She nodded even when her heart felt heavy. She smiled even when she felt empty. And sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and the walls felt too close, a single thought would pass through her mind. If everyone really knew me, would they still love me? But by morning, that thought was gone, buried under routine, responsibility, and expectation. To everyone watching, Mirabel was flawless, untouched by temptation, protected by faith, safe within the walls of her upbringing. But perfection can be a dangerous thing, because when a person is never allowed to be human, they learn to hide instead. And when the world only loves the image you show, you start protecting the image at all costs. So Mirabel continued playing her role. The girl everyone trusted, the daughter everyone admired, the symbol everyone believed in. No one noticed the cracks forming beneath the surface, and no one imagined how close she was to breaking. Mirabel's home was quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that felt heavy. Rules filled the house like invisible walls. No loud laughter, no late nights, no unnecessary conversations. Every movement had to make sense. Every word had to be careful. Her father believed discipline was protection, and protection meant control. To him, love was strictness and freedom was danger. Mirabel woke up at the same time every day. She ate breakfast in silence. Her parents spoke mostly about responsibilities, behavior, and expectations. There were prayers, yes, but very few conversations about feelings. No one asked how she was coping. No one asked what she feared or what she dreamed of becoming. In that house, obedience was praised more than honesty. Her room was small, neat, and always tidy. The bed was made perfectly. Her clothes were arranged carefully. From the outside, it looked like the room of a well-raised girl. But inside, it was the only place she could breathe. The only place where she could sit quietly and feel the loneliness she was never allowed to talk about. Mirabel learned early that emotions made adults uncomfortable. If she looked sad, she was told to pray more. If she looked tired, she was told to be grateful. If she questioned a rule, she was reminded of her position, the pastor's daughter watched by everyone. So she stopped questioning. She stopped sharing. She smiled instead. Her parents believed silence meant peace. They didn't realize silence was teaching her how to hide. She followed every rule not because she agreed with them, but because she was afraid of disappointing the people who expected her to be perfect. At night, when the house was still and her parents were asleep, Mirabel lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her mind wandered to places she had never been, conversations she had never had, and feelings she had never been allowed to explore. Why does being good feel so lonely? That question lived inside her, unanswered. She wasn't angry, not yet. She wasn't rebellious, not openly. But something was growing quietly within her. A hunger to feel normal, to feel young, to feel seen as a person, not a symbol. Her rebellion did not begin with shouting or breaking rules. It began with thoughts, small ones, dangerous ones, thoughts about freedom, about choice, about what life might feel like without constant supervision. And the more she ignored those thoughts, the louder they became. Her parents believed they were raising a strong girl. They believed control would keep her safe. They believed love meant correction. But they never noticed how alone she felt sitting at the same table with them every night. They never noticed how often she locked her door. They never noticed that silence was slowly turning into distance. And in that distance, something fragile was forming. Something that would one day push her toward a world she was never prepared for. Because when a child grows up controlled instead of understood, the desire to escape doesn't disappear. It waits. It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind Mirabel had lived 100 times before. She was walking home from a tutorial class, her bag resting lightly on her shoulder, her steps careful and familiar. The sun was already sinking, painting the street in soft orange shadows. Normally, she would walk straight past the junction without looking twice. But that evening, something made her slow down. Music drifted through the air. Not church music. Not hymns. This music was alive. Warm laughter mixed with voices, clapping, and freedom. A small group of young people sat together near the junction, talking loudly, smiling easily, existing without fear. They looked relaxed, unguarded, real. Mirabel stopped. She told herself it would only be for a second. Just a glance. Just curiosity. But curiosity has a quiet power. The longer she stood there, the stronger the pull became. No one was watching her. No one knew her name. For once, she was not the pastor's daughter. She was just a girl standing at the edge of something unfamiliar. A girl noticed her hesitation and smiled warmly. "Hi," she said. "You look lost." Her name was Tara. Tara's confidence felt effortless. She spoke freely, laughed openly, and didn't lower her voice for anyone. She invited Mirabel to sit, just for a minute. Mirabel hesitated, her heart beating faster than it should have. Every rule she had ever followed whispered in her ears, but so did something else. Something softer, something curious. She sat down. At first, Mirabel barely spoke. She listened instead. Listened to stories without judgment, jokes without fear, conversations that didn't require her to be careful. No one asked her where she came from. No one asked who her father was. No one expected her to impress them. For the first time, she felt invisible in the best way. Tara handed her a soft drink, and Mirabel's fingers trembled as she accepted it. It wasn't about the drink. It was about what it represented. Choice, permission, a small step outside the life she had always known. Her chest felt light, her shoulders relaxed. She laughed, quietly at first, then freely. The sound surprised even her. Is this what being normal feels like? Time passed without her noticing. When she finally checked the clock, panic rushed in. She jumped up, thanked Tara quickly, and hurried home with her heart racing. Every step felt dangerous, thrilling, and wrong all at once. When she reached her room, she locked the door and sat on her bed, breathing hard. She expected guilt to crush her. She expected fear to follow her into the night. But instead, she felt something else. She felt alive. The quiet of her room suddenly felt heavier than before. The rules felt tighter. The walls felt closer. The memory of laughter lingered in her mind like a secret she didn't want to let go of. She told herself it was just one moment, just one pause, nothing more. But wasn't that how it always begins? That night, As Mirabel lay awake staring at the ceiling, she realized something had changed inside her. She hadn't broken a rule, but she had tasted freedom. And once tasted freedom At first, Mirabel was careful. She checked the time constantly. She rehearsed excuses in her head before leaving the house. She kept her phone silent and her smile steady. Every small step into her new world came with fear pressed tightly against her chest. But fear has a strange weakness. It fades when nothing bad happens. She learned how easy it was to say she had extra classes. How simple it was to lower her eyes and speak softly when questioned. No one doubted her. Why would they? She had spent years building a reputation that protected her better than any lock. At home, she was still the obedient daughter. She helped in the kitchen. She prayed with her parents. She listened without interruption. At church, she still sang with devotion. Her voice steady, her face calm. People admired her even more, unaware that the girl they trusted so deeply was slowly learning how to disappear in plain sight. Outside those walls, Mirabel was changing. She met Tara more often now, sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes longer. The laughter came easier. The conversations felt lighter. She began to dress just a little differently. Nothing obvious, nothing bold, just enough to feel like herself. She learned which streets to take, which times were safest, which lies sounded most believable. And each time she returned home without consequence, something inside her hardened. The guilt that once kept her awake began to soften. Her hands no longer shook when she checked the clock. Her heart no longer raced when she opened the door. What once felt dangerous now felt normal. Was it really wrong if no one was getting hurt? She told herself she deserved this, that she was still good, still faithful, still the same girl, just with a small secret. She separated her life into neat boxes. One for home, one for church, one for herself. And the box for herself grew larger every day. Sometimes, while standing beside her father at church, she felt a strange distance from the words being spoken. The prayers felt familiar, but distant. She nodded at the right moments, smiled when expected, and felt a quiet emptiness settle inside her. They love the girl they think I am, she realized. Not the one I'm becoming. Yet she continued, because the thrill of freedom was stronger than the fear of being exposed. Because attention felt like oxygen. Because for the first time, her life felt like it belonged to her, even if only in pieces. Mirabel became skilled at switching faces. One for the world that praised her. One for the world that accepted her without questions. She convinced herself she was in control. But living two lives requires constant balance. One mistake, one delay, one slip of truth, and everything could fall apart. Still, she pushed forward, believing she was smarter than the risk. Believing she could keep both worlds forever. The night began like all the others, carefully planned and quietly hidden. Mirabel told herself she would stay only a little while. Just enough to laugh, to feel light, to forget who she was supposed to be. The house was louder than usual that night, filled with music that pulsed through the walls and into her chest. Lights flickered softly. Voices blended together. For once, no one was watching her. A drink was placed in her hand. She hesitated, then took a small sip. It burned slightly, warming her throat, loosening something inside her. The room felt softer after that, brighter. The weight she carried every day began to slip away, piece by piece. People noticed her, not as the pastor's daughter, not as the quiet girl, just Mirabel. She laughed more than she ever had. She danced without thinking. The attention felt flattering, powerful, intoxicating. Each smile she received felt like proof that she mattered. Proof she had been missing for so long. That's when Pedro appeared. He spoke gently, confidently, as if he had known her for years. He listened to her words. He looked at her like she was interesting, like she was special. When he complimented her, her heart skipped. Not from love, but from being seen. The music grew louder. The night grew later. The room felt smaller. Mirabel felt herself drifting, carried by the moment, by the warmth, by the unfamiliar freedom. Somewhere deep inside, a warning whispered, but it was quiet now. Too quiet to stop her. Wasn't this what she had wanted all along? The line she had promised herself she would never cross suddenly felt unclear. Blurred by laughter, by closeness, by the desire to feel something real, even if just for a moment. "I'll deal with the consequences tomorrow," she told herself. And in that thought, everything changed. The excitement didn't last. Morning came without mercy. Light crept through the window, sharp and unforgiving. Her head ached. Her heart felt heavy. The room was quiet now, too quiet. As the memories returned, one by one, her chest tightened. The laughter was gone. The attention was gone. Only confusion remained. Mirabel sat up slowly, her hands trembling. A deep sense of regret settled over her, heavier than anything she had ever felt before. This wasn't freedom. This wasn't happiness. This was something else, something she hadn't prepared for. She looked at herself and barely recognized the girl staring back. The image she had protected for so long felt shattered. And for the first time, fear returned, not the fear of rules but the fear of consequences, of truth, of herself. The night she thought would make her feel alive had left her feeling emptier than ever. Some choices feel exciting in the dark, but daylight has a way of revealing their cost. Mirabel walked into the party that night full of hope. Her heart still carried a fragile thread of expectation. Maybe Pedro would notice her. Maybe he would smile. Maybe the night they shared meant something more. But the moment her eyes fell on him, everything crumbled. Pedro was not alone. His arm rested lightly around another girl's waist. She laughed at something he said, her confidence filling the room, and he leaned in, whispering words that made her stomach twist. Mirabel froze, unable to move, unable to speak. Was this the same boy she trusted? The same boy she had given a piece of herself to? The laughter, the closeness, the ease with which they fit together. It was all a sharp blade cutting through her chest. She wanted to look away, to convince herself it wasn't real, but she couldn't. Every smile they shared, every glance he gave, told her what she had been trying to deny. Pedro never cared as much as she did. How could I have been so blind? She thought, tears threatening to spill. The music thumped around her, but she felt deaf to it. Faces blurred, conversations faded, and all that remained was the painful clarity of betrayal. Her hands trembled. Her chest felt too heavy to breathe. She realized she had been chasing an illusion, a fantasy she had mistaken for love. Her mind replayed every word, every touch, every fleeting moment of false intimacy. What she had hoped would be a memory to treasure now felt like a wound she could not heal. Shame burned through her like fire. She had broken her own rules, ignored her better judgment, and now faced the weight of her mistake alone. Mirabel turned away, fleeing the noise, fleeing the crowd, fleeing the eyes that could never see her heart. Outside, the night air hit her like a splash of cold water. She pressed her hands to her face, crying silently, letting the tears fall freely for the first time that night. Everything she had hidden, the lies, the rebellion, the secret moments of freedom, now felt meaningless against the reality of heartbreak. She had believed in the wrong people. She had given pieces of herself where they would never be valued. "I can't let anyone see me like this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Not my parents, not my friends, not even me." The street was empty, the night indifferent to her pain. She walked home slowly, each step heavier than the last. Every thought a reminder of how easily trust could be broken and innocence lost. When she finally reached her room, she locked the door, slid to the floor, and buried her face in her knees. The shame and sorrow wrapped around her like chains. She felt small, invisible, and entirely alone, as if the world had moved on without her. That night, Mirabel learned a truth far harsher than any rule or restriction. Some mistakes can't be erased, and some hearts are not meant to be trusted. The days had been strange, long, heavy, and filled with a restless unease that Mirabel couldn't shake. She moved through her routine like a ghost, smiling when she had to, speaking when she was asked, but every step felt hollow. Her body whispered warnings she tried to ignore, subtle at first, then impossible to deny. Something had changed, and deep down, she already knew the truth. Could it really be this? She wondered, her heart pounding faster with each passing thought. The small pharmacy down the street had been easy to find. She walked in quietly, avoiding the eyes of strangers, her hands trembling as she picked up the box she didn't want to touch. The test sat heavy in her bag, a tiny instrument that could shatter everything she had tried so desperately to keep hidden. Each step home felt slower, heavier, as if the street itself was pressing down on her. Once inside, she locked the bathroom door, the world outside disappearing. The room smelled faintly of soap and tile, yet the air felt suffocating. She opened the package with shaking hands, unpacking the small strip with an almost sacred reverence. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. She felt the weight of her choices pressing against her chest, a silent reminder of the night she could never take back. Her hands were trembling as she followed the instructions, each second stretching into an eternity. She placed the test down, staring at it with wide, unblinking eyes. Her heart skipped, her stomach lurched, and then 2 lines. Clear, bold, unmistakable. 2 lines. The truth hit her like a wave. She sank to the floor, her back against the wall, gripping the test like a lifeline she didn't want. Her mind spun in circles, questions pounding. How will I face my parents? How will I tell them the girl they trusted completely is carrying another man's child? She pressed her hands to her face, tears rolling freely down her cheeks, hot and unrelenting. No, no, this can't be real, she whispered, even though deep inside she knew it was. Every plan she had made, every lie she had told, every secret she had guarded, all of it now seemed futile. The illusion of control was gone. The perfect daughter everyone admired, the girl who smiled in church, the one who never caused trouble. None of it could protect her from this. Mirabel lay there, trembling, staring at the 2 lines that ended the illusion. Her room, her home, even the world outside felt impossibly small, pressing in on her with the weight of reality. She realized she couldn't run from this, couldn't hide, couldn't undo what had been done. The consequences were here. They were real, and for the first time she understood just how alone she would feel as she faced them. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, but it did nothing to ease the storm inside Mirabel. Her hands shook as she paced the small space in the living room, rehearsing the words that felt impossibly heavy on her tongue. Every heartbeat reminded her of the secret she could no longer keep. How will they ever forgive me? She thought, her chest tightening with fear and shame. Her mother noticed immediately as Mirabel approached, her face pale, eyes red from restless nights of crying. "Mirabel, what's wrong?" she asked gently, concern softening her voice. Mirabel couldn't meet her mother's gaze. Words caught in her throat, threatening to choke her. But she knew she couldn't run from this anymore. I made a mistake," Mirabel whispered, her voice trembling. Tears began to fall again, hot and uncontrolled. "Mom,
I'm pregnant."
The room froze. Her mother's hands instinctively went to her mouth, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, filled only by Mirabel's ragged breaths. Every fear she had imagined, yelling, rejection, punishment, was there. Yet something else followed, subtle but undeniable. Concern, love, and a quiet strength. Her mother knelt beside her, gathering her trembling hands. "Mirabel, this is a lot," she said softly, voice trembling yet steady. "But you are still my daughter. We will face this together." Could it really be that simple? Mirabel's mind struggled to comprehend. Even after everything, they aren't turning away? When her father came home later, the tension in the room grew unbearable. His gaze fell on her immediately, eyes searching for the truth he had sensed long before she spoke it. "Mirabel," he said, voice calm but heavy with concern. "What is happening?" Tears streamed down her face as she finally choked out the words, "Daddy."
I'm pregnant.
His expression softened slowly, pain flickering across his features. "Why did you let this happen?" he asked quietly, not with anger, but with the weight of disappointment and love combined. Mirabel flinched, her shame almost unbearable. I didn't know, she stammered. I've ruined everything. I failed everyone I love. Her father took a deep breath, sitting down beside her. Yes, you made a mistake. Yes, you have caused worry. But this is not the end of your life. We will help you through this. You are still my daughter, and you are not alone. Her mother held her other hand, squeezing gently. We forgive you, but Mirabel, you must learn from this. Life doesn't always give second chances, but when it does, you have to choose the right path. Mirabel's sobs softened, replaced by a trembling relief. She realized she wasn't abandoned, not completely. Even in her darkest hour, love and forgiveness could still reach her. She clung to her parents' hands, feeling a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild what she had lost. The room was quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavy yet comforting. Mirabel sat on her bed, hands folded over her stomach, and stared at the wall as sunlight streamed softly through the window. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of fear, shame, and heartbreak. But now, finally, a small clarity had begun to settle in her mind. What did I really learn from all this? She asked herself quietly, heart still tender from the storms she had endured. Mirabel thought about the nights she had sneaked out, the lies she had told to protect herself, and the boy who never cared as much as she had hoped. She remembered the pain of feeling invisible, replaced, and alone. And yet, she also remembered the unwavering support of her parents, their patience, their quiet guidance, and their willingness to forgive. It was a lesson she could never forget. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the weight of regret slowly lift. She knew now that every choice, even the smallest act of rebellion, had consequences. Every secret she kept, every moment she chased a thrill had brought her here, not just to shame but to understanding. Mirabel opened her journal and began to write. She wrote down the truth she had hidden, her fears, her mistakes, and her hopes for the future. I will never hide from myself again, she thought firmly. She promised herself honesty, not just with others, but with her own heart. No more double lives, no more chasing false freedom. The road ahead would be long, and the journey would not be easy, but it would be real. She pictured herself at church, standing once more with her family, not as the flawless image others expected, but as a young woman who had learned the hard way what it meant to be responsible, truthful, and courageous. The applause and admiration she had once craved no longer mattered. What mattered now was her own integrity and the ability to live openly, without fear of discovery or shame. Mirabel smiled faintly, a quiet strength settling in her chest. The mistakes she had made would not define her, but the lessons she carried would. She understood that life offered second chances, but only to those willing to face the truth, accept responsibility, and rebuild from their failures. Could I have learned this any other way? She wondered, a bittersweet recognition settling over her. Sometimes, pain is the only teacher who truly commands our attention. She closed her journal and looked out the window, sunlight warming her face. Mirabel was no longer perfect, no longer flawless in the eyes of the world. But she was real, and in that reality, she found freedom, hope, and the courage to begin again.